Hey guys, it's Mike here, and in this video, I'm going to discuss a topic that I've often wondered about when I've gone back and rewatched and reread the Cell Saga of Dragon Ball Z. That topic has to do with Gohan, one of my favorite characters in the franchise, and more specifically, two versions of him. The original timeline version and the one from the History of Trunks, and the question of exactly how did Gohan become a Super Saiyan in the original and History of Trunks timelines? What happened that caused him to become a Super Saiyan? At what age did he transform into one? And how long did it take him, for example, to learn how to do it at will, as we see later in the story? Well, in this video, I'm going to discuss that, but before I begin, if you're new to this channel, consider subscribing and enabling all notifications. That way you could stay up to date with all of my future videos. Additionally, make sure to leave a like, share your own thoughts down below in the comments, share this video out, and a special thank you to those of you who are watching within the first hour and who watched the entire time. You guys really help the channel to go even further beyond. But with that being said, let's get into the video. So by the time that we're introduced to future Gohan in the Future Trunks arc, the History of Trunks or Trunks' story in the manga, he's already far into his development past the Trunks and Gohan that we had seen up until that point. Or really, technically, the past of one Trunks and the future of another Gohan. And essentially we see that Gohan is already really powerful, at least compared to what he was before this point in the story, to where he's able to spar with Super Saiyan Trunks in his base form, where Super Saiyan Trunks also is another character. We don't really know in this version, the original manga version of the story, how he became a Super Saiyan. We know in the History of Trunks anime special that he became a Super Saiyan after the death of Gohan, which we see here later on in the story when he finds Gohan's body, and you could see that they definitely took inspiration from the very same scene, although that scene was likely done better in the anime version because the fact that it was far more dynamically directed, there was rain coming down, and the significance of Trunks becoming a Super Saiyan at the death of his mentor was a much greater emotional beat compared to this version, the story where Trunks is already a Super Saiyan the second we're introduced to him in his youngest stage as a kid in this original and future timeline. They are, of course, two timelines, but the reason why I keep alternating between them is because the fact that every single thing up until the point to where Trunks returns after the defeat of Cell is the same in this timeline as it was in the original timeline. So with that being said, Gohan, however, was already a Super Saiyan at this point in the story when he was training Trunks, and we saw him actually go on to transform into a Super Saiyan at will, and then go on to fight against the androids, and according to him, he had been doing a lot of training during that point in time in order to be able to defeat 17 and 18. Now, with that being said, we do see that Gohan becomes a Super Saiyan here when he's enraged. We see that he observes a city being destroyed right next to them and then in front of them by the androids. Why the androids just so happen to attack a city that Gohan and Trunks are trained next to when the androids can't sense ki is, I guess, a plot convenience, you could say. And also the fact that Gohan decided to rush in to fight these androids is also kind of a plot convenience and maybe even contrivance, considering the fact that, he stood zero chance, as we would go on to see. But of course, he decided to go in order to try and destroy one of the androids, most likely 17, because he went right for him and thought, if I could take out this android, I'll be able to at least destroy the stronger of the two, at which point 18, the weaker of the two, would be more likely to be defeated by Trunks, who, according to Gohan right before this, during the point when they were training, said that Trunks not only is improving significantly, but within a few more months, he might overtake Gohan. Naturally, 3 years later, when Trunks has now become the version that we're introduced to at the start of this saga, we see that he flies off and fights the androids and gets handily defeated. And all this really opens up a whole can of worms about whether or not Trunks was in fact more powerful than Gohan. There are different versions of this particular scene, where there are versions of translations saying that Bulma is saying that Trunks is stronger or that they're equivalent, But of course, Bulma can't sense energy, so that's definitely up in the air, and I'll talk more about this at length in another video you could see in the future. But with that being said, for this version of Gohan, we're not given a lot of indication when this might have happened. Now, comparing this to the main timeline version of Gohan, we know exactly when he became a Super Saiyan because it was during his training with Goku in the Hyperbolic Time Chamber or Room of Spirit and Time, in which Goku specifically instructed Gohan in order to become a Super Saiyan. And I think that a lot of this probably would lend context to just how hard of a struggle it would be for future Gohan to become a Super Saiyan after the fact that Goku had died before the androids attacked, and so he didn't have a teacher actually guiding him and showing him how to become a Super Saiyan, because it's very unlikely that Vegeta would have done that for Gohan, assuming that he definitely was a Super Saiyan in the future, which they show in the anime versions of the events. However, in the manga, it's never explicitly shown. Gohan really struggled at first because he had to visualize something that he didn't actually have in front of him, with the case of Goku telling him to imagine that it was Piccolo or Goku who was killed by Frieza. And so he got close to it, and then later on in the story, we do see when Gohan finally becomes a Super Saiyan for the first time, or really a Super Saiyan 3, you know, he clearly surpassed his father 2 times over in this case. Well, a lot more than 2 because of the whole multiplier thing, but you get the point. So in the future, Gohan did not know about the Hyperbolic Time Chamber, and neither did future Trunks. So as a result, as you could see in a video in the top right corner, the two of them never actually trained together in that room like we see with Goku, Gohan, Trunks, and Vegeta doing in their different trips, and then eventually Goten, Trunks in the next arc, and of course I can't forget about Piccolo. But whereas we see this transformation on screen, the first time we see this version of Gohan transform into a Super Saiyan is in this very scene right here, or in the anime special version earlier on in the special. But even in that anime special version, we don't actually see when this Gohan becomes a Super Saiyan. We know that Goku dies, but after that happened, Gohan didn't rage out and transform. Now, one possible scenario where future Gohan became a Super Saiyan could very well have happened around the time in which the android 17 and 18 attacked and killed most of the Z fighters. Trunks says that during this battle, Vegeta, Krillin, Yamcha, Tenshinhan, Chaozu, obviously, and Piccolo were all killed, whereas Son Gohan barely managed to escape alive. At that point, he became Trunks' teacher, or at least after Trunks, got old enough to where he can even fight and train, and then in turn, the two of them sparred together, as we saw before, leading to Gohan's death. However, this scene is never actually shown on screen in the original version of the Dragon Ball manga. It is shown in the anime for the most part, where we see a brief montage of the different Z fighters getting killed by the androids. However, even in that version, we don't actually see Gohan escaping or how he managed to do so, or following anything that comes after that, at least up until this point to where it jumps to. However, if you want to include the Dragon Ball Super manga continuity, we do actually see Toyo Toro's version of how the battle went down, where all the Z fighters were gathered together fighting in the city, or gathered into one frame to make it more convenient because this was like a few pages, and we see that the androids were defeating them, whereas Gohan was going off, escaping from the battle, and wanting to be able to use the Dragon Balls in order to do something in order to either save Piccolo or maybe wish away the androids. Obviously, they wouldn't have been able to wish away the androids, so maybe they were planning to make Piccolo immortal. That's something I could discuss in a video in itself. However, there's nothing that suggests that Gohan became a Super Saiyan here, even though he is crying out in agony at the death of Piccolo. I mean, he's done that plenty of times in the story, never became a Super Saiyan, although I guess he did become a beast one time. So in the Super manga version, I guess you could rule out this situation. Now, according to Android 17, there was some kind of really rough battle that occurred between him and Gohan about a year before, during which point Gohan seemingly lost his arm. So it's possible that perhaps Gohan became a Super Saiyan after this point. However, Gohan wouldn't likely be fighting Android 17 if he wasn't a Super Saiyan. I mean, he would get stomped even worse than he then goes on to get stomped in the manga version, getting killed completely off screen, totally disrespecting him in the process. So again, chances are last time Gohan fought 17, he was already Super Saiyan as well. Now, another thing to keep in mind is, like I just showed before, Gohan didn't have someone training him and showing him how to become a Super Saiyan, or just in general. And so as a result, Gohan was nowhere near as powerful as this version of Gohan when he became a Super Saiyan. He didn't train with Goku as a Super Saiyan and Piccolo for 3 years straight in anticipation of fighting the androids. Instead, he likely stopped training after the events of Namek, because there would be no reason for him to need to. As a result, the Gohan who would be slacking off and not really doing anything during this time, unless maybe Chi-Chi allowed Goku to train him on occasion or something like that over the course of the years leading up to Goku's death from the heart virus, which is very unlikely knowing Chi-Chi. And as a result, Gohan would have been the same level of power, if not weaker, than he was right here when Frieza and King Cold arrive on the Earth by the time that Android 1718 showed up and attacked. And with most of the Z fighters dead who Gohan could have sparred with, that means that Gohan, without any guidance, being a character who barely had any battle experience at all in the first place, and only really had a year and a half at the most total of training over the course of his life up until this point, would have basically been on his own, just training himself up until the point to where Trunks was old enough to be able to start sparring with him. And even then, Trunks probably never even gave him that real of a push, that big of a push back, up until this point in the story that we see right here, where he's a Super Saiyan. Even then, he's only being able to give base Gohan a little bit of a run for his money rather than Gohan when he's at his full power. And Gohan basically admits to this in terms of just how powerful he was, in which he says right here that he wore his gi because he wanted to be as strong as his dad before he passed away, which again, theoretically, would have been a weaker Goku, who trained in the main timeline for 3 years leading up to an anticipated battle against enemies far more powerful than Frieza and future Trunks, and powered up significantly when it came time for him to battle against the androids. So with all that evidence being said, when and how did future Gohan become Super Saiyan? Well, on the topic of when exactly future Gohan became a Super Saiyan, I think all the evidence suggests that it was during his training in the years after the destruction of all the Z Fighters, the Dragon team, at the hands of Android 1718, while he was hiding out, trying to survive in the war-torn future in order to be able to get stronger, to keep struggling in order to overcome those androids, and then eventually being able to compete against 17, he thought, only to find out that 17 was only using half his power and getting killed off screen, or in the anime version, getting killed when the two twins tag teamed him and put him down permanently. But what do you guys think? When do you think, and how do you think future Gohan became a Super Saiyan? Do you think maybe Vegeta did in fact help him out? Or perhaps do you think that some other events could have happened after the events of Goku's death that sent him down that path a little bit faster? Let me know in the comments down below. Additionally, if you're new here, consider subscribing and enabling all notifications so you can stay up to date with all my future videos. Thanks for watching, and make sure to stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yeah, and you better subscribe.